there's constant change in technology. And to me, that's what's exciting. I knew early on in my career I was not the type of person that could come in and just do the same thing over and over again. There are folks in every organization like that, and they are your true, foundation of your organization. But the good thing about technology is you can either have that or there's always changes in technology. If I look forward over the next 5 years, right now everybody's talking about generative AI. Here's the thing, Phil, with generative AI, we haven't even scratched the surface on what it's going to be used for.
I'm your host, Phil Burgess, and welcome to another episode of the IT Career Energizer podcast. This is the 8th in a current series of daily episodes, and my guest on the show is Tony Walker. Tony is renowned in the passive infrastructure market, with over 20 years of experience. He leads global fiber product marketing for the Siemon Company, providing high-quality, high-performance IT infrastructure solutions and services for data centers. As you'll hear, Tony provides some great insights into his own career and what he's learned along the way. I'm sure you'll find it an interesting and informative listen. So, Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I think it would be great if we could get a bit of an understanding about you, the company, and what your role is within the company, and maybe a bit about your background.
Sure. So I have been with the Siemon Company now for about 3.5 years. I've been in the passive infrastructure market, as I call it, for 20 plus years. As I get older and grayer, it's becoming more apparent. Uh, yes, I've been in this space for about 20 plus years. I've been in technology my entire career. Um, Currently, I'm responsible for the global fiber business for the Siemon Company, both the data center and enterprise side of the business, as well as we're dabbling in the campus side of things with campus networks. So anything dealing with fiber optic technology, I've got some role in. I got into this space about 20 years ago after having started my career at the company that actually invented the internet. Fresh out of college, I was one of the first business school graduates of a company called Bolt, Baranek and Newman. They got the contract back in the 60s from the U.S. Defense Agency, DARPA, to create the DARPANet, which was the world's first digital communication processing network. And I worked for them in their ISP division. We created the first true global internet backbone many, many years ago, and worked in their operations center building out connections for companies like Yahoo back in the day when they were first starting out. Um, and then went to work from there at Lucent Technologies. I was with a startup that we sold to Lucent. Again, working on that internet side of things, and ended up joining a competitor to the Siemon Company back in 2005, getting into the structured cabling or passive infrastructure space. And I've been there ever since.
Right, wow, that is some experience. So, just taking you back to the beginning, if you like. So, how did that sort of come about? How did you get involved, if you like, or where did that sort of, I suppose, initiation come from? That this was the industry that you wanted to work in.
So it's actually a little bit of a funny story, Phil. I was a marketing major at a business college outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And I thought for sure I was going to go into fundraising for nonprofits. Uh, but as a part time job, I worked for the US Department of Defense at their installation next to the university in the IT department as, kind of a college intern type role. I did not think IT was my career path. I thought for sure it was going to be fundraising for nonprofits. And I really got to enjoy what I was doing. The first project I did for the government was decommissioning networks. So they had old Banyan net networks, and they had a memory platter storage system, which if anybody remember those, are bigger than an old uh, 33 record, and that's what we used to store computer information on. And so it was my job to decommission those and order all new wiring and come up with a TCP/IP scheme that would work for that installation. And when graduation rolled around, I had the IT experience. I won't say background, but experience. And I had a little experience in fundraising for nonprofits. I was offered two jobs. One was for a museum to raise money. The other was for BBN that I mentioned earlier. And the technology job paid 2.5 times what the fundraising job paid. And so that decision was made pretty easy, but I still wasn't sold on working in IT at that point in time until I actually got into it and have just never looked back. I've had the ability to travel the world, which is exciting, but even more exciting for me personally is I really enjoy solving complex problems, and that doesn't necessarily mean my product. That's why I think a lot of salespeople get upset when I travel with them. But it's really about solving the problem and seeing the solution be implemented and verifying that it works. And with IT, I've always gotten that feedback, so it just always ticked the box for me.
Perfect. Okay. Right. So, Tony, what I'd like to start with is asking you maybe to share a career tip, one that the audience may not be aware of and perhaps should be.
Well, I think, the best tip I can give folks listening is don't automatically dismiss an opportunity or a technology because you don't know it. I almost did that with the first role I had in the passive infrastructure space because I was working at Lucent Technologies. We were the fifth largest company in the world. Everybody knew who we were. And we were doing some really cool things, selling big iron to a lot of providers and large networks around the globe. Anybody that you could think of would buy our equipment. And when the opportunity came to me, my first thought is, well, that stuff just shows up at the job site. Nobody actually cares about it. Um, and I almost walked away from the opportunity, but a little voice inside of my head said, you know what, do your due diligence and dig in. And I found out that this is a very dynamic space, even though if you ask my wife at a cocktail party what I do, she says he does boring things. Um, this is a very
Yeah.
dynamic space. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of technology. There's a lot of research, not just product development, but true research going on. We've got the latest explosion of AI. It is not the sexiest sector of technology, but if I had just gone with my initial, yeah, it's boring stuff, nobody likes it, I would have never gotten exposed to nearly half of the things I have. So, the passive infrastructure matters just as much as the big sexy blinking lights do.
And Tony, can you share with us your worst career moment and what you learned from that experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. My worst career moment probably was looking at a customer and telling them that they had no idea what they were doing. You want to talk about a potential career limiting movement. Um, because the customer is always right, they know everything. But in this particular instance, I'm thinking about it was a very large project, a very large deployment. They had no concept because, again, people don't think about structured cabling, fiber cabling, copper cabling, that stuff as being exciting, so they don't give it more than a passing thought. They had ordered so much equipment that it required 5 US tractor trailer loads. Uh, and he had a 30-minute delivery window to deliver it all. And I kept asking,
Right.
what's your deployment schedule? Because you have no
Yeah.
concept of how much equipment this really is. And the customer kept demanding, we need it all at once. We're going to install it all at once. And I remember I politely and frank but professional is a motto I use, lost my mind on the guy when I was standing there in front of his building in Manhattan with my tractor trailers, and he was yelling at me, telling me, you should have told me, just how much stuff this was, and he wasn't listening. And Um, yeah. So, long story short, ended up having to store the items across the river in New Jersey for him. But it was the one time I truly uh, went head to head with a customer. Um, I don't recommend that. Subsequently, we repaired the relationship, and he went on to continue to buy from us. But for a little bit there, it was, did we just lose the account or not? And so you always want to make
Yeah,
sure that you try your hardest not to do that, but sometimes they just push all the right buttons.
indeed. It's a bit of a bit of a balancing trick, isn't it? Really, because you obviously got to provide what the customer has asked for, but obviously you are there as a trusted advisor as well. So you've got to do the right thing by the customer, even if it's not necessarily what they think it is.
Right. That's exactly it. We got to a point where after asking so many times and trying to explain how much equipment it really was, I looked at my salesperson and said, "You know what? We're going to do it all." It really taxed the company I was working for at the time to manufacture it all in the delivery window that we were given. We had to use multiple facilities to get it done, which was not our normal course of business. But we got it done, and when we delivered it, he lost his mind because he didn't. He only had a certain amount of time to unload the truck because it was an active job site in the middle of Manhattan. So
Yep,
it was very much, why didn't you tell me? And lots of words like that were used. And as much as you try to politely say I tried to, there's only so much of that you can take. So.
exactly, exactly. Okay, so maybe moving away from your worst moment, can you
Mhm.
tell us about your career highlight to date?
I would say my career highlight has been a couple of times. It's a common theme. It's not one particular customer. It's the fact that I've been involved in 4 or 5 projects that immediately come to mind where there was a unique challenge. We've done a great job standardizing this industry. I mean, if you look at the back of your laptop or a network server, that copper port or that fiber port is the same whether it's HP or Dell or anybody else, which means all the cabling needs to be the same. We've done a really great job of standardizing, but I can think of 4 or 5 different customer requirements that wouldn't work for them. And so we had to go in and actually design a unique solution for them and see that all the way from customer problem definition to concept, production, deployment, and getting the final sign off from the customer. To me, that's really a highlight. We took something that we couldn't just use off the shelf. We had to develop something new. So it wasn't just, kind of cut and paste. Um, and being able to solve those unique challenges. That's really what gets me going. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. Does that still happen a lot, or is that less so?
It's less so from a product perspective, but we are still seeing a fair amount of how the product gets deployed. Um, you know, Commercial networks, data centers, while everybody thinks that they're very unique from a manufacturer's perspective, there's a lot of commonality. That's not to say, if you walk into data center A and data center B, they look exactly the same. That's not what I'm saying. But the products they use and the way they use them, there's some commonality there. Every once in a while, sales will stumble across an opportunity that just it doesn't fit the mold, and that's what keeps the excitement there, quite honestly.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you've got a problem of, be it cable routing or speed requirements or whatever the whatever the problem is, and you get to solve it uniquely. That's very exciting still.
yeah. One thing I'd like to ask you,
Hmm.
given that a lot of corporates are now sort of embracing the move to the cloud as such, has that changed your business?
It did a couple of years ago. It's funny because 5 years ago was all the rage. We're moving to the cloud. We're no longer going to have on-prem data centers. Uh, you know, we've found that folks are now moving some applications back. If we did this interview 5 years ago, companies were moving 100% to the cloud. And what we're finding is they're moving 50% back into their corporate network for a variety of reasons. It could be that after the initial cost to be in the quote unquote cloud, the cost have risen too much versus having it on prem. It could be, if you're in a co-location facility, for example, right? They typically sign deals where they're discounts in the first year or two, and after that, the costs climb, and you figure out it's cheaper to have it local. Or it could be that specific applications work well in the cloud and then others work better on prem. There's a variety of reasons. We haven't yet found one reason why folks are moving back, and they're not moving back wholesale. Again, they're picking and choosing the applications to bring back. So 10 years ago, they may be talking about building a 25,000 square foot facility. Now they're talking about building a 7,500 or 10,000 square foot facility for these 5 applications. And we're going to leave the rest in
Yeah.
the cloud type thing.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be interesting to see how that progresses and whether the trend remains or if there's a switch in either direction.
Yes. Yep. It's one we're actively watching because it changes who our customer is for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So, Tony, can you tell me what excites you about the future of the industry and potentially careers in technology?
Well, I would say, there's constant change in technology. And to me, that's what's exciting. I knew early on in my career I was not the type of person that could come in and just do the same thing over and over again. There are folks in every organization like that, and they are your true, foundation of your organization. There was one company I worked at. We had a customer service person. She spent 38 years at the same desk doing the same job. I thought that was fantastic because she knew all of our customers. When they called in, she knew their families, their kids, and now their grandkids. I mean, having that level of relationship is amazing, and you want that in your organization. But the good thing about technology is you can either have that or there's always changes in technology. If I look forward over the next 5 years, right now everybody's talking about generative AI. Here's the thing, Phil, with generative AI, we haven't even scratched the surface on what it's going to be used for. We have some inklings. We think it might be this. We think maybe healthcare and financial will be the first verticals that will truly embrace it. But there's a lot more behind that technology. And so as that gets more pervasive, even the things that we do around passive infrastructure and structured cabling, the way we design, develop, and deploy networks will change. It'll still be cabling, it'll still be connectivity, it'll still be those things, but the way we do it will be different than we did it 5 years ago. And so there's always change. So there's the challenge that I find exciting of keeping current, but then there's also that excitement of just you never know what's around the corner.
Just a quick interruption to remind you to follow or subscribe to the show in your podcast app. Every download and listen improves the show's discoverability. By subscribing and downloading, you'll be helping more people to develop successful careers in tech. And my thanks to you for being a listener. If you have any suggestions about things you'd like covered in the show, or potential guests, why not leave a comment or review? You may even get a shout out in a subsequent episode. We're going to go into the reveal round now. We're going to find out a little bit more about you and the way you think. You ready for this?
Sure.
So we've covered this slightly, but what first attracted you to a career in IT or technology?
Well, I started as an intern sort of type position. It was a position at the Department of Defense geared for college students to help them out with projects that folks never really got time to do. Uh, and I liked the fact that they were going through some major changes. They were moving from a closed circuit network, a Banyan net solution, to an IP based network, which is something that is just wide open and we've been using now for years. When I was going through that project in the early 90s, that was cutting edge. So the fact that, there was constant change and, I was on what I thought was a pretty large scale project, making sure that everybody had the right TCP/IP addresses and upgrading PCs to actually handle, Ethernet cards back in the day. Um, that was just, it had an element of hands on, it had an element of planning, it had an element of forethought, and I was learning something new almost every day. And to me at that age, that's exactly what I needed.
Yeah. And what is the best career advice you've ever received?
It's probably the same advice most of us have gotten from our parents. There's a reason we have two ears, two eyes, and one mouth. Look and listen longer than speak.
Yeah. And conversely, what is the worst career advice you've received?
Don't invest in Nvidia sooner.
Right.
No, all joking aside, the probably the worst career advice is when I was first starting out. Uh, I had my university assigned us a mentor, and I went to him with the question of, I thought I was going to go into fundraising for nonprofits, or this tech company is offering me a job. And he said, you don't want to work in tech because it's always changing, and one day's heartthrob is the next day's loser, and you can be out of a job where, there'll always be people begging for money. It's the way he put it. Um, and I did not take his advice because I've had a pretty good career in tech, but if I had taken his advice, I may be kicking myself.
And if you were to begin your career in today's world, what would you do?
I would ask a lot more questions than I did early on. And by that, I mean, I had never known what a product manager was. Career day, we never had anybody come and say, hey, I'm a product manager and here's what I do. There's a lot more roles inside of technology, inside of IT, than just an IT administrator, right? Most people, that's their maybe one and only interface, phones tech support, or in-person tech support. There's many, 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 many different careers beyond just that. I mean, those are two very important roles, don't get me wrong, but there's many, many more. And it's taken me a career to kind of figure out where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do when I grew up. If I was starting over, I'd probably ask more questions up front and map a career path sooner.
And what career objectives are you currently focusing on?
Um, the biggest one is I still want to continue learning. Um, Part of that is because I want to stay relevant. I don't want to be the guy that sits in the corner and says, "Back in my day, we use this and this only." I think it's important in IT and technology to stay current and to stay relevant. Um, you know, as I've gotten older, my career objectives have moved away from this job title or that job, and more about I want to work on this exciting project or talk to this type of customer. Um, so it's not as traditional as, in 5 years I want to be a director, in 10 years a VP, 15 years running the company. um, my thinking has changed over the years to I'd rather be on the exciting project than have the title.
And what's the number one non technical skill that has helped you in your career so far?
Well, if you ask my wife, she will tell you I can talk to anybody. I have actually talked to potential customers while stuck in an airport on a delay, just talking to the guy next to me about the airline and the delay, and other people interacting with the airline staff, and before you know it, you get to talking and you find out that's one of your customer targets your sales team is going after, and you know before you know it, you made fast friends with a potential customer. So it's the ability to carry on a conversation with folks, because I think wrongly IT in general gets painted as they're not talkative, friendly folks, and I don't think that's true. But I think that's how it's portrayed in a lot of TVs and movie, and again, most people's interaction is with help desk people, and that's typically not a good interaction, right? You're not calling to say hi, you're calling because you have a problem. Um, but if you have the ability to talk to people, um, and just find out, what their motivation is or what makes them tick. It will help you, no matter where you are in the IT field. If you're on research or development or support or sales, it doesn't matter. People want to be connected with.
They do. I think that stereotype you referred to, yes, you still see it, don't you? Particularly in the
Hmm.
media. But yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true either. Yeah. And what do you do to keep your own career energized?
I'm trying to challenge myself and the people I work with, because it's very easy to become complacent. And so, in order to challenge properly, because there's a way to challenge where you're just being difficult. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is to uh, challenge appropriately. So, we may be having a discussion on a particular way to solve a problem or a new product that we're thinking about. I try to play the devil's advocate, but in a frank but professional way. And in order to do that, you've got to have a certain level of knowledge about whatever it is you're trying to solve. And so I energize myself by, trying to prepare as much as I can about that particular topic. I'm not saying you need to become an expert. And then, come prepared to say, well, everybody's on board with doing, ABC. What about XYZ? Or what about 1, 2, 3? Or we think a customer is going to use this product this way, but what if they don't? What if they use it in another way? What would that do? And just challenge people to think differently, because unfortunately, it's pretty easy to get it roped into what I call groupthink, where one or two dominant personalities says, "Yeah, this is the way to do it." It's like, yeah, that's one way, but did you think about this, this, and this? So I really try to bring that aspect, um, to at least make sure that we think about something, either research it more, dismiss it, or whatever it is, but at least somebody's given some thought to it and we just didn't charge down a path blindly.
Yeah, perfect. And what do you do in your spare time away from technology?
So I love to cook, and I also love to eat. So I typically, much to the chagrin of my wife and family, um, will try to continually make the same dish until I determine it to be perfect. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but when it comes to cooking, I am competitive. So if I see somebody do something on TV, I immediately assume I can do it and probably better, which is not normally the case. But I keep trying, and they've eaten the same meal multiple times, the same day or same week, uh, so that I can get it to where I think it's perfect in my mind. Um, yeah, I love to do that. So.
Okay. And Tony, can you share with us a parting piece of career advice?
Yep, I'll go back to the comment I made earlier. Don't overlook something because you don't think it's the new sexy thing. Because I'll be completely honest, the new sexy thing is just a fad. And maybe a year, maybe 5 years, it'll be something else that's the new sexy thing. Look at something in the IT space. If you're thinking about a career in the IT space, look at something that keeps you intrigued. A lot of people say, "Oh, you should do what you love." I actually disagree with that, um, because I think you need separation from your career and your passion. Um, I don't think those two should blend because you tend to become blind, so to speak, when it comes to those things. So I think there should be some separation. I've entered IT and stayed in IT because it continues to intrigue me. My passion is cooking. I know I couldn't make any money at it. I know it couldn't be my career for a lot of reasons. Um, that's why it's my hobby. But you've got to be intrigued, because if you're not wondering what about, then this probably isn't the right career for you, or any career for that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah. Very well put. Good. And Tony, how can we find out more about you and connect with you?
You can find information on the Siemon Company at Siemon.com, Siemon.com. Myself, I'm out there on LinkedIn, Anthony B. Walker. my official IRS name, as I like to say. You can find me out there if you want to learn more about kind of how I meandered into the space I'm in. Um, but yeah, check us out.
Tony, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been great chatting with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. It's been great chatting with you as well.
Thanks for listening in to another episode of the IT Career Energizer podcast. And thank you again to Tony Walker for being my guest on today's episode. Please remember to subscribe and do tune in for another great episode tomorrow.